Two-state visit, World War III, and reform. These are the interesting times. Hello everyone and welcome to the Interesting Times, a political comedy show from the UK. Now, having been off the last week, we've got a bit to cover. Did I say a bit? I meant a fair amount, or actually, a lot. Shed loads. Okay, a quick recap. America was founded as an independent republic nation in July the 4th, 1776. Yes, that's important. They decided they didn't want to be run by a king, queen, consort, emperor, tsar, chancellor, high representative, sultan, dark lord. That should be unelected dark lord. This thinking, and it was a noble one, was that anyone could be president, provided they had a penis, no matter how small. The problem is that while anyone can be president, you have to ask, does that mean anyone should be president? See? I told you it was relevant, which brings us to 2024, where the Americans were left with a stark choice between a man who claimed the last election was stolen and attempted to instigate a coup with 34 felons against his name, and the oldest man in history, later to be changed at relatively short notice to a woman and therefore a disqualified candidate. The felon won, but you all know this, right? So, Starmer turns up to the White House, sits down, everyone gets on great until...
Look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time.
Just to correct our beleaguered or beloved, depending on which week it is and depending on your point of view, Prime Minister, we don't have free speech. We don't, and it's a nonsense to pretend otherwise. And do you know who else doesn't have free speech? Every other country on the planet. If you voice an opinion, there's going to be consequences. From nice ones to not so nice ones, to jail. Because you can't say what you want in any civilized society. If you tell your boss he's ugly and thick as pig shit, which is free speech, you're going to get fired. Singing I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, free speech. Singing it in the home section of the Den on match day will, I imagine, bring fairly violent consequences. On the flip side, you are completely free to give someone a compliment. People forget that bit, don't they? Huh? But this is from the Nigel Farage Liz Truss, they're trying to silence me camp. Nigel, who has appeared on Question Time a staggering 37 times, who has had his own show on GB News and on LBC, and even appeared on I'm a Celebrity, and been accused of having a God complex from MPs within his own party, thinks he's being silenced. Which is a shame, as we clearly aren't trying hard enough. We don't have consequence-free speech is what I'm trying to say. But that's because, again, nobody does. Anyway, the meeting went well. Starmer gave Trump a letter from the King. Ooh.
This is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented.
So, Trump's coming to the UK. Expect to hear lots of that there free speech you've been missing out on, your presidents. All seemed to be fine. A potentially awkward moment with Joseph Goebbels was subverted. But of course, that was the fluffer to the main event. Zelenskyy turned up to the White House to sign a minerals deal for the heinous crime of having been invaded and not just rolling over for the Russians. Things didn't start great.
He's all dressed up today.
A snarky comment, which was then turned into a snarky question.
Question for President Zelensky. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit.
Well, that's free speech, I suppose. Being able to ask dumbass questions like, why don't you wear a suit? Or, why don't you brush your hair? Or, how do you see out of those eyes? That there is Brian Glenn, and he is the other half of Marjorie Taylor Greene, and host of a streaming web channel called Real America. Well, about time. I'm fed up of having to listen to the fake America, and following this rather piercing and well-crafted form of questioning, things kind of went downhill. Firstly, with Trump.
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. Psst.
Hey, Donny. Probably not a good idea to mention Russia and Putin. You know, this guy sat next to you, not a fan. And then, by J.D. Vance.
For 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy.
Which was the point that Zelensky decided that he's had enough of these clowns and decided to pack up the circus.
But after that, he broke this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
Well, maybe he's seen stories on negotiating peace deals.
This
Have you
conflict.
ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Then come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories.
Now, I'm assuming that JD was worried that those damn newspapers would be plastering that as a headline the very next day, so decided to distract them with something even more stupendously stupid. Well, it's the only explanation I can come up with for him saying this.
Country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems.
Manpower problems? Sorry, are they fighting a war for the security and freedom of their country? Or giving excuses for why a parcel won't be delivered today? Then Trump said this.
It's going to be great television, I will say that.
And promptly threw Zelensky out of the White House without signing the deal. Trump then went on the ironically named Truth Social, the best place to decide all foreign policy, particularly if it's relating to World War III, to scream into the void. So, how on earth did this go so badly wrong?
But you must have sat there watching, thinking, I've had worse blow-ups of President Trump, and the next minute he's on the phone telling me I'm welcome to play golf.
Well, he was actually on the phone that morning.
Yeah. So did you wind him up so much on Friday morning?
Okay, who had Piers Morgan starting World War III on the sweepstake? I mean, who knew Piers Morgan would not be a good person to seek counsel from on matters of careful political discourse? A man who lied about British soldiers in wartime and hacked the answer phone messages of grieving relatives to increase the circulation of his paper. A man who famously stormed out of the Good Morning Britain studio because he didn't like the fact that people questioned his over-bizarre infatuation with Meghan Markle. A man so disliked, in fact, by those people that even his co-star on that same programme didn't want to give him a welcoming hug. He is the second least qualified person with the initials PM in politics I know. Zelensky then came to a pre-prepared trip to London to meet various leaders from Europe, Canada and NATO, and was greeted by Keir Starmer, who gave him a hug, which, as we Brits know, is virtually sexual intercourse. And he also met the King. It's like the next Paddington film. And in a rerun of the beginning of World War II, it was France and Britain who initially pledged troops to a peacekeeping deal, although Starmer was still trying to get the US involved by saying that any deal needed the involvement and a backstop from the US. President Trump on Truth Social, again, said Europe said that they couldn't do this without the US. Probably not a great statement in terms of a show of strength against Russia. What? And this was...
influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the
car.
cards right now.
And then on Tuesday, Donald Trump gave a State of the Union address, which wasn't actually a State of the Union address because and spoke for over an hour and 40 minutes. By the end, even Adrian Brody was like, come on, mate, wrap it up. And bearing in mind the age of your average senator, there must have been quite a few of them wondering if they were going to make it till the end. True story, he spoke nearly 10,000 words, which is nearly 5 times more words than George Washington used with his very first State of the Union address. And you think that Georgie boy would have a few more things to talk about. Okay, first things first, what are we going to call ourselves? I'm liking Land of the Guns and Cheeseburgers. Show of hands? Also, how do we swap this god-awful accent for something that makes us sound more intelligent? Any ideas? Then, as if all that wasn't bad enough, the dim to Trump's dumb J.D. Vance piped up with this little nugget of nonsense.
The very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
Excuse me, Mr. Upholstery is my vice president. We in the UK have 2 separate taps for hot and cold water, making washing your hands painful no matter what you decide to do. We drive on the left over here, just about the only country in Europe to do so, apart from a 50-metre road in front of the Savoy Hotel for some reason. We also have an annual cheese rolling competition, which involves people throwing themselves from a virtually vertical hill like they're extras in a zombie film to try to win some cheese. And 3 of the UK's country's national animals are a lion for England, which sounds mad until you remember that Wales has a dragon, and Scotland a unicorn. Yes, really. So, a bit of respect if you don't mind. We are not some random country. We are the most completely random country. In fact, the most regular thing about us is our randomness. Keir Starmer, though, without mentioning the soft furnishings fondler by name, set about to set the record straight.
642 individuals died fighting for Britain alongside our allies. Many more were wounded. We will never forget their bravery and their sacrifice. And I know the whole House will join in me in remembering them and all those who serve our country.
Yeah, you might just want to put a pin in that whole House comment thing because you've not heard from the gaffer yet.
And I must ask you about J.D. Vance's comments just recently. He's caused quite a lot of outrage, suggesting that Britain is just some random country that hasn't fought a war for 30 or 40 years. This was in the context of Keir Starmer's proposals on some kind of peace arrangement. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know J.D. Vance quite well. I've looked at the comments. I don't think he actually said that. I think a lot of people are getting carried away.
Really? You won't condemn Vance's disgusting comments about our armed forces' sacrifices, but you're quite happy to stand next to someone who has literally draped themselves in the Union flag? Even the American media were appalled by this.
This random country, Great Britain, the country we have a special relationship, some random country? Well, here's a list of recent wars that random country fought alongside with the United States. I don't know where to begin. I really don't. Calling Britain some random country when they have stood behind, much to their detriment.
Although, not as angry as the British media.
How bloody dare you?
Now, you're almost up to date. Just the last 48 hours or so. Phew, and it's all coming in thick and fast. I mean, mainly thick. But anyway, Trump has stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine and ordered the UK to do the same. The UK has so far refused, but Russia responded in the most evil fashion to this news. Then Trump responded in an even more evil fashion.
Do you, Mr. President, think that Vladimir Putin is taking advantage of the U.S. pause right now on intelligence and military aid to Ukraine?
No, I actually think he's doing what anybody else would do. And I think probably anybody in that position would be doing that right now. He wants to get it ended, and I think Ukraine wants to get it ended, but I don't see, it's crazy. They're taking tremendous punishment. I don't quite get it.
Yeah, it's called courage and sacrifice. But yes, I can see why you don't quite get it. Trump has also held talks with the opposition in Ukraine. Strange. Why is he not having talks with the opposition in Russia? Right. And he's also thinking about revoking the legal status of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees. And God knows when else by the time I put this video together. But to give you some idea of the bull in a China shop approach Trump is taking to the planet we all live on, the Mirror yesterday ran with the story 5 dark and troubling things Donald Trump has done in the last 24 hours as he defends Putin. And Trump is really pushing to get the mineral deal signed with no US backstop guarantees. But if there are US companies mining in Ukraine, will that be enough to stop Russia's further encroachment on their territory? Well, no, for rather obvious reasons.
What is the way for us to make sure that Putin would not attack us again? And I was in Kiev in 2022 when we had many US companies that was there, and I remember how US embassy was evacuating when Putin attacked.
Exactly. It's unlikely to stop Russia invading Ukraine due to the fact that it didn't stop Russia invading Ukraine. Also worth mentioning, mining for minerals isn't like playing Lord of War on the Xbox. Depending on what you're mining for, you could be looking at 10 to 20 years before you even start to see some return on your investment, making the whole agreement essentially worthless. Europe, meanwhile, is arming itself like it's about to get invaded from the east and the west, and potentially leaving peace agreements that have been in place for decades. At least we know that the EU has good intelligence. After all, that's where they're getting all their good advice from.
That we have to put Ukraine in a position of strength, that it has the means to fortify and protect itself. It's basically turning Ukraine into a steel porcupine.
Wait a minute.
They're basically in future totally indigestible to Putin. A steel-quilled porcupine.
Okay, that's a concern. So, all of this, I appreciate, looks terrible. But there are small silver linings. The balloon seems to have popped on the populist movement that was threatening to sweep across much of the globe, including right here in the UK. Yes, it's not been a good week for reform, which obviously makes it a great week for the rest of us. It started when Richard Tice, Deputy Chairman for Reform and neo-fascist game show host, was on a visit to Glasgow and crowed over 2 defections to Reform and was put on the spot.
Who are your defectors today and where are they from?
So we've got I've got John and Ross, and
What
they
are
are
their
from.
surnames? I don't
They're
know
from.
John and Ross.
Are you going to challenge me on everything, or are you going to ask a policy
Challenge on
question?
that.
Well, I'm answering policy questions.
What are their surnames?
I'm asking policy questions about how we make people
My
better off.
question.
Good.
My choice of question
And John and Ross.
to you is what are
And
their
they're
full
John and
names
Ross.
and what councils are they from?
John and Ross.
What councils are they from?
Next question.
You
Who's
cannot
next?
tell me who your council
Who's next?
defectors are today. Why not? Do you know anything about Scottish politics? You can't even name your own members up here.
We've got 10,000 members. I don't know all 10,000 members.
But these aren't members. They're councillors. 2 of them. Bringing your total of Scottish councillors to 4. The other 2, I'm guessing, are Aaron Brew and Glenn Fiddick, from the Balamory ward, of course. So, it seems that things are going badly for Reform. How badly? Have a guess who the journalist works for. I'll give you 3,000 guesses. Nope. 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 Oh, look. Just take a look.
Tom Gordon from the Daily Mail.
Et tu, Brute? So, as horrible as things got for Reform, don't worry. They're about to get a whole lot worse.
Allegations of serious bullying have been made against the Reform UK MP Rupert Lowe. The party says it's received complaints from 2 women who worked in his offices.
Typical Reform. You've only got 5 MPs and you still fall out. Rupert Lowe, MP for Greater Yarmouth, has had the whip removed and details have been passed to police over threatening behaviour. But of course, this is Reform, so things aren't as straightforward as that.
Yes, this is developing hour by hour, and we just have had confirmation from the Metropolitan Police. What they say is that on Thursday, the 6th of March, they received an allegation of verbal threats made by a 67-year-old man. The threats were made on Friday, the 13th of December.
Hour by hour, and indeed month by month, it seems. But if all this happened last year, how come the police weren't informed till Thursday? Well, it seems that on Thursday, Rupert had been a naughty little disciple, as you can add blasphemy to the list of charges.
Here's today's big question. Is Reform UK on the rocks? Well, that's what the Conservative Party are claiming today after Rupert Lowe, MP, MP Rupert Lowe has said that Nigel Farage acts like a messiah and needs to learn how to delegate. Let's talk about today's interview with Andrew Pearce.
That's right.
With Rupert Lowe and the schism that seems to have caused.
So the Daily Mail says, an interview with Andrew Pearce, who works for GB News 2. Rupert Lowe tells him it's too early to know whether Nigel will deliver the goods. He can only deliver if he surrounds himself with the right people. He says we have to start behaving as if we are leading and not merely protesting. Nigel is a messianic figure.
He's not the messianic figure. He's a far-right fascist Putin-fluffing twat. Well, difficult who to believe though, isn't it? Actually, it's easier to know who not to believe, both of them. So, could they work things out? Possibly. Lowe has invited Farage around for dinner, a request he's made over the last few months. Rupert, maybe it's time to admit he's not that into you. Take the hint. But Nigel gets it. It was never about power. They talk a lot about how well they do in general elections, but out of 650 MPs, they've got 5. That's not even 1%. And then they boast about councillors. But even with the defections, out of over 18,000, they've got 79. Although, it probably shouldn't be a surprise that for a party made up entirely of men, that they should exaggerate their size. Happy International Women's Day for yesterday. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you have enjoyed these videos, then feel free to like, share, subscribe, comment and hit all the notifications bell, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.